Kevin Gordon here from Autosavant.com with our first pass at the format we're planning to use for our infotainment reviews, or in other words, as infotainment isn't a word that everybody in the world may not be familiar with, our in-car navigation electronics reviews. So information and entertainment, right? My plan for this one is to walk you through both the standardized format that we're going to be using and also this particular car that we're in right now. So typically at Autosavant we don't like to use any kind of cookie cutter format for our reviews, but in this space of in-car electronics, I think it's only fair to cover at least some of the same exact areas across all of the cars that we're going to be looking at. You know, when it comes down to the different ways that infotainment systems and navigation systems deal with user inputs and respond to voice control and those types of things, I think it's only fair that we compare apples to apples as much as is possible. So what are we in right now? Right now we are in the 2012 Volkswagen Tiguan. This is the SE model with navigation and the sunroof package. This two-wheel drive model comes in just above $30,000. The SE model with navigation of the Tiguan gets you Volkswagen's 310, and I believe it's the RNS system. It also gets you a 300-watt 8-speaker stereo. Also available on the Tiguan is the premium navigation setup, which is the RNS 510, I believe. They get you a few more buttons up here, a different layout, and the primary difference from a navigation perspective appears to be that that one has traffic navigation, where this one doesn't, even though this one does include satellite radio. The 310 navigation system gets you a 5-inch touchscreen that's a decent resolution. It's not the highest thing out there, but not so bad. And it gets you a variety of ways to interact with it. You notice there's a power button, a knob, 2 buttons here, and then another button over here. This is actually your back button, so as you're going through menus, you can actually move back to your previous, which is a very good and important feature, and one that not all cars have, but I think that they should. The concept of back, instead of having to go to a whole different menu interface to be able to deal with them, is a definite plus. One of those things that's annoying and a lot of cars deal with is the fact that you'll notice that right now the stereo is off, so we get the time of day displayed. You can't interact with the navigation system without actually turning on the radio. Which means that if you have the volume up on your radio and you want to see nav, it comes up. Not the biggest of things, but it is a little annoying that when that's off, you have no ability to deal with the nav system. As far as the interactions go with the nav system in the Volkswagen, you can do them while driving. And if you'll notice, if you go into navigation, and we want to go put in an address, and we go to number, you'll get a little pop-up message that says, entering complex data while driving is dangerous. This is true. But they do let you go, okay, sounds good, and I can still go in here and put in numbers. The other thing you get in this setup is a screen in between the dials that gives you a decent amount of information as to what's going on. It's, you know, just a black and white LCD screen. They may call it a TFT, thin film transistor, but it's a little LCD screen in between the two dials here, and you can interact with those through a 4-way toggle, push button, and another back button here on the steering wheel. Right now it's set up to look at my phone, and it's telling me which phone's connected, the fact that I have no network reception, thank you very much AT&T, the exterior temperature, how far I've been driving, the direction I've been driving, the time it is currently, and which mode the transmission's in. Down at the bottom, you also get information on what's going on with cruise control, and if you set it, it tells you the specific speed it's set to. So if we click through this, like I said, I was on phone before. You also get a screen of navigation in here, which is a handy thing. It replicates whatever the upcoming turn direction is going to be over there. You get whatever song you're listening to, or any other radio information that may be going on redisplayed up here. And you also get your standard trip computer that gets you a bunch of different things, right? Instant miles per gallon, average, current speed, average speed, how long your trip's been, range to empty time, so on and so forth. The navigation system isn't one of the brightest systems that I've dealt with. I do like the fact that you'll notice here on the nav address input screen, you can start with either a house number, a street name, or a city or a zip. It's nice to have that flexibility of going, well, I know the street name, but I'm not sure about the town, but I know it begins with an M, so I can go that way. That would be great, except for it really doesn't work all that well. I've tried a few different addresses that have flat out confused it. The nav screen does have the ability to work both in 2D and 3D views. Zooming takes place here with this rotary knob, which is handy instead of having to push plus and minus buttons on the screen. So I've got a route programmed in now. I've actually got the volume turned all the way down. Part of the reason why having these...
Turn left in a quarter of a mile and continue following the PA 29.
Part of the reason why having duplicate displays of what's going on is important is because if we now go over to the radio, you'll notice you lose your navigation display. The display doesn't have the ability to show two different things happening at the same time, but showing again all the stuff that's going on in between the two dials works out as a pretty good substitution. The other thing I always want to try to test whenever we have a car with navigation is how well the voice response works. Well, as far as I can tell, and I've tried to read through the owner's manual and the navigation guide and everything else, there's no ability on this car to voice input an address. There is a voice control button, which if I press you'll hear.
Main menu.
Help.
Help. To call or contact, say for example, call John Smith at home. You can also say, dial number, redial, or further options. To stop the dialogue at any time, say cancel.
Cancel. You'll notice that there's nothing about going in and picking a address, destination, any of that stuff. I think the only voice control that works is the ability to go through and pick a person to call from your address book. From a audio connectivity perspective, there really are a ton of options in this. So you get a aux in port. There's a SD card slot here, which I've got an SD card set up. You get CD in, which for those of you who still have CDs, congratulations, you can still put them in. You get AM, FM, and Sirius satellite radio connectivity. Each one of them has 12 spaces to be able to put in presets. The MDI, which is their iPhone connectivity port, Bluetooth audio, and CD. Here's a picture of their iPhone port, which is in the center console. I have not been using it in any way, in all honesty, because of the fact that it's in the center console, it's a 6-inch long cable, and as I said in the road test portion of this review, I'm just not a person who comes in, plugs in his phone in a center console, and leaves it there for the entire trip. It unfortunately makes it a little bit useless for me. Even though it is nice, you get a direct real connection to an iPhone. The other big problem is, despite what many of the German car manufacturers seem to think, not everybody in the world has an iPhone. A lot of people still have Android phones or other MP3 players that would just interface better with a standard USB port, the way a lot of other manufacturers have decided to standardize. One of those other tests of how robust a car's infotainment, navigation, electronic system really is one of two things. One, when you are connected to Bluetooth audio, leave the car and come back, does it have the intelligence to wait and reconnect to Bluetooth and then continue to play whatever you were playing on your Bluetooth device? In the Volkswagen Tiguan, that does not work. When you come back in, it defaults back over to one of the other settings, whether it's your radio band or Sirius. It will not reconnect to Bluetooth and start playing automatically. The other thing is, if you go through and bother to manually connect it to Bluetooth audio like we are now, does it have a way to start playing whatever you were listening to last on your Bluetooth device? Unfortunately, again, the answer on this is no. You've got to now go pick up your phone or whatever other Bluetooth device you have, and take the risk of unlocking it, which I'm sure everybody just saw my iPhone passcode, like other people have commented on before. Figure out, what was the last thing I was listening to, reopen Pandora, wait for it to connect, and now you'll notice once again I get all the stuff. On the plus side, it does do a very, very nice job of redisplaying what you're listening to on Pandora. So in this instance, I'm listening to some kind of comedy station, and all Jim Norton's information's up there, album, track title, artist, how much time's been played, how much time is left. That part's really good. But if it had a play pause button, it would be even better. So there's two more parts of the infotainment review that I want to go through and do. One is the stereo evaluation, which I will get to in a second. And the second is, does it have any other goodies, any other, wow factor things to it? In this car, the answer is simply no. But in the future, things like, is it connected to the internet? Does it have apps or applications? What are those? How do they work? And those types of things we'll go through. So in every car stereo and navigation review, are we going to go through all 10 of these specifically and talk about them? No. But they will be the 10 tracks that I always use to go through and see how well a stereo can produce music. So how does the Tiguan's stereo do? And in the beginning of this, I talked a little bit about the levels of the navigation system. Well, also in the levels of the stereo, this one is the sort of default stereo that comes with the 310 navigation system. There's also a step-up stereo that comes with the premium navigation system. I haven't had a chance to listen to that, and to be honest with you, I don't know what the specs of it are that make it different from this one. Again, this is, as I understand it, an 8-speaker, rated at 300 watt stereo, and unfortunately watt ratings these days, who knows what they really mean, because is that at RMS, is it peak, who knows. From an overall impressions perspective, the stereo in this is actually pretty good. It's bright, mid-bass can get a little muddy, and from a bass perspective, on some things it does very well, and on other things it really is unfortunately long. So from a bass perspective, this stereo really doesn't have the low-end grunt to be able to reproduce what's supposed to be happening with 6 foot, 7 foot as far as a track. Now, with Beyonce's video phone, which is a boomier bass sound, something that's a little bit more extended, it can do that quite well. But it goes to show that it isn't quite ready, and it isn't a stereo that's got a big standalone subwoofer to it. It's relying on door speakers to be able to. Other impressions of the stereo. So in the higher end rock stuff, it doesn't get the best of separation. So the way I typically pick these was I took a listen on everything. I mean, one, I sort of know a list of songs I like to listen loud to on a stereo. But then I take them on, put them on a set of studio monitors, real Sony studio monitor headphones that are very, very flat in a lot of ways. So what they're not designed to do is take things like a pair of Dre Beats and, pump them up. It really is meant to have you listen to music the way it's made, so if something sounds good on them, it's going to sound good hopefully anywhere. the stereo deals with rock music pretty well. The tweeters that are up front and the speakers in here are bright, but the one thing that they don't do all that well is separate out what's happening from a stereo and surround perspective. So things that move left or right quickly, you don't really notice it happening. And it isn't to say that I want something to be artificially coming, and flying by, but you do want to be able to know where, when they put together the tracks, where they're coming from. And that gets a little bit lost. I find that's true in a lot of cars that have the tweeters pointed directly at you and so close to you. The other thing that happens is things get a little muddled when they get busy in here. So when you really get music tracks that are, going through a lot of changes quickly with vocals and multiple layers, you can just feel those sort of get mushed together. And understand, this is a very good stereo. It's just these days there's a lot of really, really good stereos out there. So the question that I always have to myself is, how do you differentiate them? And that's what I can tell you about this one. And then on a positive note, no, from a stereo perspective, when you get into some of the rock bassy parts, so the kick drum that happens in Metallica's One, or the bass lines that are in Jack Johnson's Banana Pancakes, those work beautifully. One of those ways I can always tell if Jack Johnson's bass lines are being reproduced correctly is when you feel them sort of in your chest. Do they move sort of up and down you as the bass tracks do? Well, in this they do. So again, different stereos can be tuned for different types of listening. This one seems to be very good for that stuff. Okay on boomy bass tracks that might be in rap, harder times and stuff that's really much cleaner and harder and lower. Overall, for something that's not, branded anything, that doesn't cost extra as a stereo, it's something I'd be very happy to live with day to day in, a mid-range car. In a $30,000 SUV, it's a pretty good stereo comparing it to everything else that's out there. So there you go, our first infotainment review with all the categories broken down for you and a lot more description than we'll normally get to in one of these. If there's something that is missing, something you'd be interested in seeing, or anything you'd be interested in having changed, let us know in the comments below, either on YouTube or on autosavant.com. As always, I'm Kevin Gordon, and I look forward to talking to you guys soon.